In this exciting episode, Mildred Crest dodges a bullet when her fiancé backs out on her at the last second. The only happy love story in this episode involves an amnesiac. That'll make a gal move her feet. It's Season 2, Episode 15 of Perry Mason, The Case of the Footloose Doll. Welcome to the Perry Pod. I'm your humble host, Jonathan Searcy, and my purpose here is pretty simple: provide an audio companion to the greatest legal drama in television history, Perry Mason. I plan to do a pod for every episode of the television series, and as time permits, I'll look at some of those made-for-TV movies too. I'll be working through the series in the order in which the episodes were aired. Each episode I'll give a brief refresher on the plot, and if the episode was based on a novel, I'll compare the book with its television adaptation. Next, I'll list some key pieces of trivia, as well as tackle the episode's main theme. We'll feature a Perry proverb, a moment of wisdom from the man himself, and then we'll finish with a post-case water cooler, where just like Perry, Della, and Paul, we can rehash the ins and outs of their adventures. But first, to the law library! This episode in the law library, we discuss deference to particular witnesses. In the case of the Footloose Doll, Hamilton Berger expresses regret that he couldn't keep Senator Baylor out of the case.
Your Honor, I had sincerely hoped that it would not be necessary to involve a prominent statesman in an affair such as this. I now find that I'm forced to call to the stand Senator Harriman Baylor.
In what other episodes have we seen prosecutorial deference to a particular witness? Probably the best example is in Season 1, The Case of the Haunted Husband, where Hamilton Berger apologizes to movie mogul Jerry Haywood for wasting his time.
I know what a busy man you are, Mr. Haywood. I'll try not to keep you any longer than is necessary.
Thank you, sir.
Perry's callback in cross-examination is classic.
I want you to know, Mr. Haywood, that I, too, realize how busy you are, and will try to be as considerate as the district attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mason.
One other instance I could think of, Veronica Dale from The Case of the Vagabond Vixen, where Berger asks Mason to go easy on her because she's just a kid.
I suppose you're going to want to cross-examine this young lady.
Yes, I am.
Remember, she's hardly more than a child.
Pro tip, when Hamilton Berger wants you to treat a witness extra special, that witness is probably crucial to cracking the case. Although, in these three examples, that witness was not the murderer. The more you know. Now, let's get to the plot of this episode. The Case of the Footloose Doll. Marshall City's very own Mildred Crest is feeling pretty good. She's the pride of the office because she's marrying Bob, a man every bit as mysterious as his name suggests.
Gosh, your picture in the paper and church wedding, 6 days off, honeymoon in Hawaii. Golly.
Oh, and don't forget Bob.
Oh, yes, Robert Wallace. Tall, dark, and mysterious, and with half the girls in Marshall City after him.
But I happen to be the one sitting at the next desk at Marshall City Power and Light in the accounting department.
But before the first commercial break, Millie is in tears. Why? Bob's a schnook.
Now, what makes you think I'm joking? I have here in my pocket, taken from the firm for which we both toil, the sum of $9,000.
$9,000?
Yeah, you see, I did a little juggling with the books. They'll discover the loss on Monday, but I'll be gone. So will you if you're smart.
Why, I have nothing to hide.
I know that, Millie. It might be tough to prove. You see, I did most of the juggling in your books.
So, Millie goes a-driving, and when she stops for some gas, she picks up a hard-luck sister headed for L.A.
Boyfriend trouble? Forget it, honey. Running after a guy will get you nowhere. I speak from practical experience. But this last time, instead of driving around, I'm driving straight. 1,000 miles straight into a brand new world where nobody's ever heard of Fern Driscoll.
Alas, Fern Driscoll, as the Footloose doll calls herself, is packing heat, and hijinks ensue.
Just step on the brakes and...
They had to include a scene where Ruta Lee shrieked after her honey of a fit at the end of the Case of the Screaming Woman, where she was the murderer.
That as a result, a life may be ruined.
Well, Millie finds herself with Fern Driscoll's stuff in L.A. and decides she might just do better if she called herself Fern. She finds a roommate in a local diner. What? And suddenly, things are looking up for old Millie. I mean, Fern. It doesn't last too long, however. She's accosted by investigator Carl Davis, who seems to know a little too much about the car wreck and Millie's responsibility for said car wreck.
I got a hunch that you were driving Miss Crest's car at the time of the accident. I want a statement to that effect from my insurance company.
Why should I give you any kind of a statement?
Well, to put it bluntly, to avoid being charged with having left the scene of a fatal accident.
Well, this finally gets Millie to our man Perry. She's not coming clean. She maintains the whole "I'm Fern Driscoll" story. So Perry does give her the "you've been a murderer on this show before, this time you're my client" discount.
I haven't very much money. I have got a job lined up, but...
How much change do you have in your purse?
38 cents.
I'll take it.
Well, she's gonna need it, because when someone mysteriously visits her apartment, she goes after the visitor with an ice pick. And it's Carl Davis, who sounds like he was on the receiving end of that blow. Perry knows the story that Davis is telling is bogus.
Suppose you tell me how all this happened.
Well, about 7 o'clock, I went to her apartment.
Fern Driscoll's apartment?
Yeah. She knew I was coming. And how? I knocked, she opened the door and said, "Come in." And when I did, bingo, she let me have it with the ice pick.
And he finally gets Millie to come clean. But when Davis ends up dead from an ice pick wound, well, it's Millie who's on the ice block. Let's examine the possible suspects. There's Senator Baylor, the man Davis was ostensibly working for.
I want to know just how you were concerned with Carl Davis.
Well, he was investigating an automobile accident in which Miss Driscoll was involved. On checking back, he discovered that she was friendly with my son. He got in touch with me.
You see, Senator Baylor's son was in a torrid love affair with Fern Driscoll. Baylor wanted the two separated, and Baylor apparently owns a logging facility in Fairbanks, Alaska, and shipped his son out, then got rid of Fern Driscoll. But Driscoll disappeared with letters from the son that condemned Baylor as an old fuddy-duddy. Baylor didn't want that getting out to his adoring public.
My darling Fern, I can't apologize enough for the way my father is behaving. Now he wants me to go to Alaska. He claims it's business, but I know better. He says you're not good enough for me. And this from a man who poses as a friend of the people. If the voters knew him the way I do, they'd ride him out on a rail.
What actually happened? Well, the real Fern Driscoll, she's alive. The woman who Mildred picked up at the gas station, that was an escaped convict. So was it the senator? Well, yes, if the question is, was it the senator who got an ice pick in the arm from Mildred. Yep, it was him. And Perry calls him on his old "I've got bursitis" trick.
Mr. Mason, this is a very grave accusation.
I realize that, Your Honor. And with all due respect, I would suggest that the court appoint a physician to examine the senator's right shoulder.
That won't be necessary. Mr. Mason is correct. I have a severe infection due to a wound from an ice pick.
But it's not Senator Baylor. If not him, who else? I mean, we've got Earnshaw, the schlubby operative of Davis, who's dating Millie's roommate. But he's not viable. Nope. That only leaves the wife. Early in the episode, we hear why she accompanied her husband on the road.
It's your own fault. You should have stayed home in San Francisco where you belong.
Let you come down here alone and play around?
How many times do I have to tell you that this is business?
Suppose it was business when I caught you with that redhead in San Diego.
And now, having to confess the crime, she gives her motive.
I don't care! He had it coming to him! He was gonna leave me! Leave me! He was gonna...
Yep, that's what would have happened if Millie had married Bob. She dodged a bullet. This episode was based on a 1958 novel, and given the proximity between the novel's publication and the episode's air date, which was January of 1959, it's surprising to me that there are still some differences. Number one, Bob doesn't hang Millie with the crime in the novel. That is, the sleazy ex-fiancé doesn't make it look like Millie was the one who stole, like he does in the episode. He just absconds with the funds. Number two, it's clear that the Footloose doll is the woman who Millie picks up at the gas station. The phrase is used in the book at that point by the woman who calls herself a Footloose doll. We never hear anyone called a Footloose doll in the show. Number three, Harriman Baylor, not a senator, not a logging magnate from Fairbanks, Alaska. Nope. In the book, he's a Michigan-based businessman. Number four, instead of being an aging nag, Mrs. Carl Harrod, a.k.a. Carl Davis, that's his name in the book, isn't really Carl Harrod's wife, and seems to be a woman of ill repute that the investigator picked up in a bar doing work, and she repays him by driving an ice pick through his heart. Number five, the whole ice pick angle, way more convoluted in the book. The ice picks are bought from a local store. Perry sends Della to buy ice picks to try to confuse the key prosecutorial witness. It's just an unneeded complication that the teleplay writers wisely dropped. Number six, no Earnshaw, schlubby operative, or roommate in the book. Those are inventions purely for the television episode. And number seven, perhaps my favorite part of the novel, Perry puts his client on the stand. And Millie does a good job. We've only seen Perry put his client on the stand once in the television show. That would be in the case of the Terrified Typist, and that didn't go so well. Now, let's get trivial, shall we? Each week in our trivia section, we give you 3 takeaways. A Paul is a subject worth investigating more. A Della is a deep dive into an actor or actress who appears in the episode. And a Perry gives us a key fact about our intrepid hero. Our Paul this week involves 2 phrases from this episode. One is from the embezzling ne'er-do-well Bob.
Our little romance is finished, Millie. Let's devil take the hindmost.
The other is from blackmailing philanderer Carl.
Don't now Carl me. I'm fed to the teeth.
This episode's Paul prompt: what exactly do these phrases mean? That is, what is their definition? And where did they come from? Our Della for this episode is Ruta Lee, a.k.a. Mildred Crest, a.k.a. Fern Driscoll.
And I'm Fern Driscoll.
She appeared as the murderer in the case of the Screaming Woman in season 1 at the tender age of 22. She was born in 1935 in Montreal, Canada, to Lithuanian parents. Apparently, she still speaks Lithuanian fluently. Her family moved to LA when she was in her teens. She graduated from high school in Hollywood, and before she was 20, she had gotten a breakthrough role as one of the brides in Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, the 1954 musical. I knew her first as the other woman in 1957's Witness for the Prosecution. If you name a 1960s TV show, she was probably in at least one episode. Twilight Zone, Andy Griffith, Richard Diamond, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Maverick, M Squad, Gunsmoke, 77 Sunset Strip, The Alaskans, Colt 45, Wagon Train, Rawhide, Wild Wild West, The Fugitive, 3 episodes of Hogan's Heroes. In the 70s, she was in the movie The Doomsday Machine. Coming of age in the 80s. In the 90s, she was on Roseanne. And here are some fun facts. In 1976, she married herself a restaurant executive and remained married to him until he died earlier this year, 2020. In the 1960s, she wrote to Nikita Khrushchev asking for clemency for her grandmother, who had been in an internment camp since World War II, and Khrushchev granted the request, and the grandmother came to America and lived with Ruta. Ruta was also instrumental in running the charitable organization The Thalians with Debbie Reynolds. This organization raised money for troubled youth and mental health organizations. Ruta Lee still kicking. Hats off, Ruta. Our Perry this week involves his subtle way of revealing a client's true identity. Gotta love the call out.
Davis sounded as though he were sure you had them, that I'd deliver them to him. Mildred.
Yes.
Isn't it about time you told me the truth?
Note, this move only happens in the television show. It may only work in the world of television, but it's an effective shorthand for Perry's insight into human nature. She's got to be honest with herself, and Perry elicits that honesty with aplomb. Our theme for this episode is Footloose. You know what that word means, don't you? You're able to move freely because you've got no responsibilities or commitments. Now, who's actually footloose in this episode? Answer, only the criminals. Bob the embezzler? They never catch that guy. And the fake Fern Driscoll, the carjacking pregnant convict? She's footloose. At least she says she is in the novel. And look how she ends up. Being an adult, and definitely being a law-abiding adult, means putting up your dancing shoes for a time and sticking to your commitments and responsibilities. Millie, you can run, but you can't hide. Senator Baylor, here's my advice. Be a good dad. Then maybe you can be a better senator. And I don't see Perry dancing anytime soon, but there's nobody who's better at making and keeping promises. Now, let's hear a Perry proverb. This week's Perry proverb shows that Perry values character, not money. When Senator Baylor offers him a huge retainer to help him in his fight, Perry has a really simple answer.
Mason, I'll give you $10,000 to represent me.
But that's not the proverb. The proverb is when Senator Baylor wants to know how much money Mildred Crest is paying Perry, and he gives him this amount.
I've already accepted a fee from Miss Crest.
How much did she give you?
38 cents.
You can't buy Perry's loyalty. He's not some footloose doll. When he makes a commitment to you, it's because of your character. The senator may have bought off the prosecutor, but not Perry. Now, let's take a sip from the water cooler.
You know, there is one thing I don't understand.
Go on, Paul.
Our Paul prompt from the case of the glittering goldfish had 2 parts. an easy prompt, and a hard one. First up, what poem was our murderer quoting here?
Awake, promiscuous Prometheus, for morning in the bowl of night hath cast the stone that puts...
Both Aunt Myra and my dad, John Searcy, correctly identified Daryl Metcalf's allusion to the Ruby Yacht of Omar Khayyam. The second prompt, is there a gill fever miracle drug out there? If so, has it been popular wherever fish are sold? And again, Aunt Myra and John Searcy were on the case. The answer is no, because the major cause of gill fever is dirty water. So the answer to gill fever is simply putting your fish in clean water for 2 to 3 days. That's it. If it involves changing the water, you can be sure there's no paste you can smear on mesh that will help facilitate a better gill health process for your fish. As always, I love feedback about this particular episode or the podcast in general. Was there something about this episode you'd like to comment on or something you'd like to correct? Thanks to Judy for sending me an email about the pod being back. I really appreciate it, and asking a really good question about my send-off, which is Keep On Walking That Park Avenue Beat. That's an allusion to the title of Fred Steiner's famous theme song to the show. You can email me at theperrypod@gmail.com, and all PerryPod episodes are available via Spotify, YouTube, and iTunes. Thanks again for joining me on this pod journey. Please join us next time as Hugh Marlowe lights a fire under the case of the fraudulent photo, and that's photo with an F. Until next time, this is Jonathan Searcy saying, keep on walking that Park Avenue beat!